I'm a 23-year-old woman, and I was in a relationship with a guy, Alex, 24, for about 6 months. I had been single for a few years after ending a tough 3-year relationship, and I finally decided it was time to give dating a serious shot again. Enter Alex. A little backstory. My lease was about to end after I had lived in my apartment for 3 years. Although I hated the place, I was about to renew the lease because it was affordable. Then Alex suggested that I move in with him instead. At the time, he was living in an apartment with his best friend and the friend's baby mama, who he didn't get along with. I was starting a new job, and things started to get messy with the roommates. They were jealous and wanted us to pay more than half of the bills. I was fine with paying, but Alex insisted he wanted to take care of me and said I wouldn't have to pay anything once we moved in together. I disagreed, but he was adamant, so he ended up leaving that apartment because the dispute with his roommates got out of hand. We eventually moved in together a month later, and things quickly turned sour. I had never lived with anyone before, and I thought to myself, how bad could it be? Well, I found out the hard way. Alex chose an incredibly expensive apartment, despite me warning him that it was a bad idea. He assured me that he made enough money to afford the $1,800 rent on his own, claiming that half of it was only a small fraction of his income. I had started my new job, and it was paying better than his, so I had to sign the lease as well, since we needed both of our incomes to qualify. In hindsight, I know I was naive and should have trusted my gut. The situation deteriorated very quickly. Alex became emotionally and physically abusive. He headbutted me twice, slapped me on several occasions, and would often try to force himself on me, screaming at me for days when I refused. He called me every name in the book, threw things, and generally made life unbearable. One time, he even tried to assault me while I was drunk, gagging, and having a panic attack. It was incredibly traumatic, and we also quickly ran into financial issues. We'd had 6 weeks free rent, but when it was time to start paying, Alex came up short. The first time, it was just $200, and I was understanding. The next month, on the 31st, I asked if he had paid, and he assured me that he had. The next morning, however, he called me begging for $580, claiming he couldn't make up the difference. I was furious, especially because I had worked extra hours to make exactly $500 to cover the shortfall that he had promised to pay me back for. I insisted that he pay me back, and he agreed. A week later, he tried to gaslight me into splitting the rent 50-50. I agreed to this, on the condition that he take responsibility for his own groceries, as he was consuming them far too quickly. After a couple of months of this, I had had enough. I ended up breaking up with Alex 4 times. He insisted that if I left him with the apartment, he would ruin my credit. At this point, I had furnished the entire apartment with my own money. I paid for everything: groceries, furniture, gas, Wi-Fi, all of it. Alex didn't contribute a single dime to any of it, and he wouldn't have even had a chair to sit on if I had left. Eventually, he moved out, but he dragged the breakup process on for 2 months. Initially, we had agreed that he would continue paying his half of the rent for 3 months after we broke up, and then I would take over the full payments. But that quickly fell apart. He would call me constantly, showing up outside my apartment, alternating between yelling at me and begging me to be friendly. If I didn't give in, he'd refuse to pay his portion of the rent. Every first of the month he would throw a tantrum, claiming that I was just after his money and blocking me. I had to make new phone numbers to contact him, and then wait another 2 weeks for the rent to be paid. At that point, I decided to stop trying to be nice and told him outright that he owed me $500 for his share of the last month's rent, as well as an additional $500 that he had promised to pay me for the past 6 months. He initially refused to pay, but kept going back and forth over the course of a month. One day, I finally told him, "I can just take you to court. I have you agreeing to pay in writing, and I will get my money." He told me his mother, who he was currently living with and who had been asking him for money every day while we were together, was advising him not to pay, and that I didn't have a case. I had informed him months ago that his mother was hiding a foreclosure from him, so I told him I wouldn't trust her legal advice. Alex would always give money to his friends or his mother, no matter how late it made him on the rent, but now he was refusing to pay me anything. After weeks of endless messages, blocked phone numbers, and him constantly harassing me, I sent him a Cash App request for $500. He declined and started sending me requests with notes like, "You ruined my life." He would say this all the time, even though the breakup and financial mess were entirely his fault. He had put me in a terrible financial situation. He claimed I ruined his life because he had to go back to his mother's house. His car had been repossessed during our relationship after months of him saying his rent was late due to paying his car note. Since moving out, Alex had been jumped by someone, though he never gave me a clear explanation of why. I couldn't figure out where all his money was going, but I knew it wasn't going to pay me back. I tried asking, but he never gave me a straight answer. I sent a request for $54 saying, "This is how little it costs to open a court case for my money." He finally unblocked me and said he would pay me back when he got his next paycheck. I told him I needed a firm date or I would file a lawsuit. He agreed to pay me the first $500, claiming the rest would come from his tax refund in 2 weeks. Of course, 2 weeks later, I didn't get the $500. He called several times trying to argue down the amount I was owed. I listed all the things he had broken or never paid for, which I hadn't even included in the total amount I was asking for. I told him, "If you want to nitpick, so will I, in court." Eventually, he agreed to pay the full amount out of his tax refund the following week. But here we are, a month later, and I'm still being blocked and still haven't received the money. Last week, I drafted a final demand letter and taped it to his mother's door, also emailing her a copy, fully expecting a series of angry texts. But nothing. No messages, no arrangements, nothing at all. So now I'm a day away from filing a lawsuit, and still, it doesn't feel like enough. To be honest, I want revenge. I've thought about texting his boss about all the issues he's caused while at work. I've considered messaging his friends he talks badly about. I've even thought about telling the people who jumped him about his whereabouts. I feel like nothing will satisfy me at this point. I just want to move on, but the anger is consuming me. I feel like I raised him for months, and this is the way he repays me. I don't know if I should draft another letter demanding he pay his half of the lease so I can finally be done with it, but I know that will just drag it out further. What do I do now? I feel like I need something more. Regardless, revenge will be had. I just hope it's over soon. I'll keep you all updated. TLDR. I got an apartment with an abusive ex. He didn't pay his rent and I'm still stuck paying for the expensive apartment. Now I'm taking him to court, but I'm still furious and don't feel like that's enough. I want revenge, but I'm not sure what to do next.